Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar entitled Developmental Reading in English, Implementation and Teaching Strategies, Case Study 3 of 3. I'm Bill Joyner from the North Carolina Community College System's Learning Solutions team, and I'll be your host this morning. This webinar is brought to you by North Carolina Community Colleges and SuccessNC.org. Our presenters today are Dell Enecks of Beaufort County Community College, Elizabeth Hirai of Southeastern Community College, and Jocelyn Hirai of Davidson County Community College. Also with us is Cynthia Liston, Associate Vice President for Policy Research and Special Projects at the North Carolina Community College System Office. In just a moment, Cynthia will say a few words on the history of this DRE redesign endeavor, and later she will moderate the question and answer period at the end of the presentation. Which brings me to my next point. Throughout the presentation, we want to hear from you. Please type your questions and comments in the chat box located on the right side of the screen. I'll be watching the chat box and capturing all of your questions. We've scheduled some time today at the end of the presentation to address all of them. Once again, thank you for being here. And now, without any further ado, I'll turn the program over to Cynthia Liston. Cynthia?
Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy that folks are able to join us again today, and just want to mention that this is the third of 3 DRE webinars that we have hosted here through the system office. And the other 2 were the previous 2 Fridays, and they may be accessed on the SuccessNC website. If you go to SuccessNC webinars, you will see those. And I do encourage you to take some time to listen to those webinars if you were not able to participate in them live. In addition, this webinar will also be recorded, and we will therefore, you can share this information with colleagues at your institutions that may not have been able to participate. The way that we've structured these is to profile what various colleges who have already piloted or are planning to implement the DRE courses this fall. So each of them has a different flavor in terms of how they are preparing for and implementing the courses and what they're focusing on, and it is our hope that by profiling a number of different colleges' models for DRE, that other folks in the system will have a better sense of how to approach implementation of this new curriculum. So I have decided that on this webinar I am going to very briefly go through the timeline because I've already done it on the previous 2. And so if you want to hear a little bit more about the history of where we are with the redesigned reading in English curriculum, then I encourage you to listen to those on the archive, or perhaps you've already heard it. But essentially, we are at the stage now where we have this semester pilots of the new DRE courses that are taking place at 7 colleges, and the implementation year for the new DRE curriculum starts this fall, so that by fall 2014, the old developmental English and reading courses will go away, and all colleges will be using the new DRE courses. In addition to the webinars this spring, we are planning to hold some face-to-face professional development for faculty and department chairs this fall. And we are also working with College Board on the development of a new English and reading placement test that will be available in spring 2014 to accompany the new curriculum. So I will now go ahead and turn this over to Dell Eng and her colleagues from Beaufort Community College. Dell is a member of the English and Reading Task Force and has been working with her colleagues there to prepare for DRE. So I think I have just now handed it over to Dell, and so she can go ahead and start.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm Dell Enecks from Beaufort County Community College, and I just want to talk to you a little bit about what we've done here. We did pilot 096, 097, and 098 this spring, one section of each course. And we do plan to go totally with the DRE classes in the fall. The textbooks that we have chosen to use are the Pearson Textbook Reader and English at Hand from Townsend Press. We are actually going to use both of those textbooks in all three courses. The Pearson Textbook Reader has several different chapters, and we've just sort of divided those chapters up. I'm covering in 096 a chapter on diversity, and my colleagues will talk to you about what they're doing in 097 and 098 in just one second. Before I get into the 096, I know that a lot of people have questions about logistics of scheduling the classes, so I just want to let you know what we're doing here at Beaufort. We are going to be able to teach all of our classes in computer classrooms, and I know we are really blessed to be able to do that. For right now, they will all be seated. We are looking into hybrid, but we haven't gone that route yet, so they'll all be seated, web enhanced, but seated. And we're actually using 3-hour blocks to schedule 2 sections so that there might be an 8 o'clock class Monday through Friday with the lab section in that same classroom on Monday and Wednesday at 9, and then there might be in that same classroom a 10 o'clock section, and the lab would be at 9 Tuesday and Thursday. So it kind of helps us be able to coordinate getting as many classes scheduled throughout the day as we can. So, as I mentioned, I'm actually piloting the 096. We are using the first chapter, which is the Communicating in a World of Diversity. Now, notice that as I go through this on my slide, I do have guide the students because, quite honestly, the Lexile levels are higher than are recommended for 096. But I do that only with the material that I'm guiding them through. For the assessments, for the writing prompts, and for the reading that they'll do where I'll determine how they're doing, those are outside readings that are at the appropriate Lexile level. So we kind of guide the students through pre-reading and using context clues, annotating. Then in terms of also teaching the reading, we talk about finding main ideas, textual supporting details, graphic supporting details, and it's really nice that these are materials, you know, it's an actual chapter from a textbook, so those are the kind of graphics they'll actually see when they start reading in their own curriculums. Because that chapter contains a lot of examples of diversity and comparison contrast, those are the 2 patterns that we focus on in the course in both terms of reading and writing. The students do use the computer to generate ideas for pre-writing. They actually write and draft their paragraphs, are able to revise and edit right there in the classroom. In terms of teaching grammar and punctuation, and we do use the English at Hand book for that, but that sort of evolves from the writing itself. Typically, I'll have a couple of days set aside after they complete a writing assignment where we'll address the grammar punctuation issues that have come up from the writing that they have done. In terms of assessing their mastery, I use 2 to 3 reading assessments. As I said, they're based on outside readings at the appropriate Lexile level. The information is related to the chapter, so the content that they read from the outside readings are about diversity or clear communication. And each test does cover all the material that's covered, the new and the previous material. In terms of their writing assessments, there are 2 or 3 throughout the 8 weeks, as we cover additional things such as the first assessment is just on topic sentences, supporting details. Then the next one would be actually incorporating a particular pattern, so the rubric changes as we go along. And as I mentioned, also, we are using illustration and comparison contrast as our 2 techniques. I think it's advantageous to use these textbook chapters, gives them an opportunity to really practice as it's done in the curriculum courses, and it also gives us a lot of opportunity for class discussion, which can lead into appropriate writing topics. So that's in a very quick nutshell what we have done and what we plan to do in 096. And now I'm going to turn the presentation over to my colleague, Dana Sauls, who's going to talk to you about what she has done with 097.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Sauls. And 097 is the Integrated Reading and Writing 2. And I've just sort of got up here some pre-reading, reading, and post-reading strategies that we use. Basically the same, I'm sure, as everyone's seen before. With 097, of course, we do a lot of annotating, highlighting. We get them recognizing main ideas and thesis statements, and we pay more attention to transitions between sentences and between paragraphs. Also in 097, we get the students to start paraphrasing and summarizing portions of the text as well. Before the students begin to write, I model 2 sample essays using MLA format. I also introduce them to, of course, thesis statements, body paragraphs, how to write clear topic sentences, and, of course, a good conclusion. In 097, we are only requiring the students to cite at least one source. So, again, I model proper citation formats for books, periodicals, and web sources. But we also have a step-by-step guide that we give the students to use for Microsoft Word, and it also has many other sources included in Word for inserting citations and works cited pages. And again, as Dell said, I also use the English at Handbook during this process, and as the grammar issues come up, then we address that per student. Again, pre-writing, writing, post-writing, writing strategies. We have them free write. We have an organizational plan that I have the students fill out. They are required to fill out an organizational plan before they begin writing. A lot of students do not like to do that, but we absolutely make it mandatory for our students. In 097, I have a practice reading and writing assessment, and then I have 3 other reading and writing assessments. And whether they pass or have to re-enroll into the course depends on those reading and writing assessments. Again, it focuses on their ability to read and write multi-paragraphed essays. The essays that I focus on in 097 are illustration essays. Dell mentioned Lexile levels. For 097, you can see here it's between 1070 and 1220 for 097. I put the website up here. It's a really user-friendly, it's just lexile.com/analyzer. Of course, before you use it, you must register, but after that, you just go in, submit your Word documents, and it will automatically analyze the Lexile measure for you. And I just put a sample up here. I went into my history, and this was just a sample of one that I submitted in November, and of course you see it gives you the Lexile level and of course the word count with whatever you submit. Very important though, your Word documents must be submitted in plain text for it to analyze. Reading assessments, my students, they have to read 2 to 3 page articles, and then I assess them on such things as highlighting thesis statements and details. They must also identify minor supporting details, transitions, words in context. This is usually on their first assessment. As I progress to the second and third assessment, I start adding purpose and tone and inference skills as we progress throughout the semester. This is just how I decided to approach my reading assessments. I use reading assessment 1A, 2A, and their final reading assessment. Again, they have to be at least an 80% or above in order to pass the assessment. If they do not, we do have B versions for the students to take. In order for the B version, for them to take that, of course, we give intervention. I'm sure everyone's aware of that. Writing assessments, sort of the same. I give them a writing prompt. They have to take their reading that they just took their reading assessment on, and I take a prompt and I sort of, they have to use the reading assessment, the reading material, and the writing and put it together. Experiences from their own life or the life of someone they know according to the topic of the reading material. Again, my writing assessments are set up the same way as my reading assessments. You've got 1A, 2A, and final writing. And again, we have B versions if they do not pass the first version. Oh, before I move to give the microphone over to Pat for 098, I don't have a slide on this, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some exciting things that are coming in the fall. We are actually working on podcast, and Pat will talk to you a little bit more about, she's actually completed some. I'm in the process of integrating podcast into our course. Since my chapter is Allied Health and I teach the sleep chapter, I have been in contact with the Sleep Center here in Washington, and actually she is coming to record next week, as a matter of fact. She's going to come and record. She's going to talk to us about connecting the brain to sleep. She's going to talk about polysomnography. She also has a sleep study that she's going to moderate for us, the stages of sleep. And again, before I set this up, I actually gave her a copy of our chapter in the textbook, and she took it with her, and that's how she's been gathering her material. So everything that the students are going to learn in the chapter, she's going to sort of give them an example of certain things that we're going to go over in the chapter. Also, we're trying to include instructors here on campus. I've been in contact with the anatomy and physiology instructor. She is also going to record a podcast for me. And I've also been in contact with the education department here, and we're going to try to get something together with them, either them or actually have the students do podcasts for us as a requirement in their course. Okay, I think I'm done, and I'm going to turn it over to Pat Walker.
Good morning, I'm Pat Walker. I've piloted 2 sections this semester of DRE 098, and again, I'll reinforce what Dana said about reading materials and Lexile range. Of course, Dell has provided us with that Pearson textbook, and I've checked my scores there to make sure that they're fairly in line with what we need. The DRE 098 calls for 1185 to 1385, so when I use the Lexile.com, I do make sure that we're somewhere in that range. You can see 2 documents I've pulled there at the bottom. Not particularly lengthy documents, but certainly the useful ones there that would fall in that range. We begin at the first of the semester with teaching the reading strategies, and the whole point there is to use the SQ3R in my course to make the reading meaningful and manageable. We go through the traditional pre-reading strategies, and the students really seem to appreciate this time and finally apply what they learned in ACA about breaking up the material in chapters so that they can manage it when they have the long chapters to handle in their curriculum courses. We go through creating questions and using end-of-chapter text questions to help the students understand the material, as well as looking at that vocabulary that's provided. The 2 chapters that I've used this semester out of the Pearson book, one on American history and the other one on psychology, and I'll talk about that one in just a minute. As we go through the reading process, having the students identify main ideas, thesis statements, and supporting details, all of that comes into play, especially as they look toward using this material for writing.
and then again in the post-reading process to answer questions, the ones they've created for use in their writing as well as for test taking, and then the ones that are in the textbook. As we get into the reading strategies, in the history chapter, the students found out quickly that textbooks aren't always pretty with thesis statements and topic sentences where they are supposed to be or may not be there at all. So within that first session, first part of the semester, my students learn about implied main idea as we work through that. And then when we get to the psychology chapter, they're pleased to see a fairly well-organized chapter there. The first, the part on the history, our section of that textbook applies to American history of the Old South, and then the psychology has to do with stress and management. Therefore, I decided to bring in some podcasts. I worked with one of our adjunct psych instructors as well as our full-time sociology instructor. The students were interested somewhat in the Old South, but they found it pretty dusty. So I linked to their outside world study of poverty in Appalachia from President Johnson's Great War on Poverty. And the questions immediately began to come about why people would continue to live in such dire circumstances so late in our time period compared to what had been going on 200 years before. So that led to perfect questions for the psych and social instructors. They came in, and James Casey in our Academic Support Center, our coordinator there, prepared the podcast so that we can use those again and embed them in our courses in the future when we do some hybrid work. We finished with our post-reading strategies, again with a look towards writing, picking out those pieces of material that we may need to paraphrase, creating summaries, and then reviewing. And then finally, in that chapter, Dell, Enecks, and I both we collaborated to bring in some artifacts. She had some antique tools that she brought in, and I brought in some pottery, things that women might have used as well as men at that time in the Old South, so that the students could have something of a 3D experience. It wasn't just 2D for them and all on paper. Also, as we're doing the reading, once we finish the textbook reading and handling that, help them have that outside world, the text-to-world experience they need for their writing, I bring in supplemental materials, articles, items from NC Live, and perhaps other textbooks. They will read that material prior to those podcasts so they can use that information in their writing. Once we've completed our reading, we go through a reading assessment. The articles are handed out the day before. These are pertain to what we have read in class, that same area of information. And the students' questions that they have will include typical, I think, type questions for a reading instructor to look for about finding main and major supporting details, main ideas, and identifying patterns of organization, context clues for definitions. I also provide questions at this 098 level that would appear in a curriculum classroom so that the students can begin to handle that kind of information. I also ask that they paraphrase a sentence in there, even though they've already done a summary. I want paraphrasing as well so that they can begin to tie that into that reading that's coming next. Once we're through with the reading assessment, we go into the writing strategies, and we use a model essay for the appropriate rhetorical mode that we're going to write in, go through the traditional pre-writing and writing strategies there, again using Microsoft Word. We do use MLA formatting, and my students are required to do three works cited, and they must provide in-text citations throughout. Once we've finished that, I work with them, even if they're going through it, and then once they've finished, I work with them to help improve their writing, addressing grammar and style issues there. Once we've finished their writing in conference, we'll do a writing assessment that uses that article that I used for the reading assessment. They will tie that in, and I give them 3 hours of class time to do that writing assessment. Once it's graded, then we come back again and look at what they need to do. I come back with a total of 2 reading assessments and 2 practice essays with 2 assessment essays, 1 in each rhetorical mode, before I move them on. And that pretty well takes care of the 098. I wish you folks luck as you bring your courses in this fall.
Hi, this is Dell again, and I'm now going to turn it over to Elizabeth.
Hello, everyone. This is Elizabeth Hirai from Southeastern Community College in Whiteville, North Carolina. We have not piloted this semester, but we are making plans for our implementation. And so I will be talking to you from the point of view of a school who is in the throes of the planning and implementation process. First of all, just a word about Southeastern Community College. We are a rural college. For the school year 2011-2012, our enrollment was approximately 2,600 students. And in the fall of that year, 2011, 51% of our first-time students enrolled in developmental English and/or reading. Currently, we are not integrated. We have 3 levels of reading, 70, 80, and 90, and we have 2 levels of English, English 80 and 90, and our 90 currently has a lab component. Our plan is to do a phased implementation of the new DRE classes. And I cannot take credit for this. Our Chief Academic Officer came up with this plan, which I think is a really good one. But as you can see from the chart here, our what he calls legacy courses, the old English and reading courses, will gradually drop off semester by semester as we add in the new DRE courses. So just for example, in the fall of 2013, Reading 70 will sort of drop out of our offerings as DRE 096 is brought in. And it sort of continues that way until in the fall of 2014, of course, all the old courses go away and we're strictly DRE. And so we thought that this would create a good transition so that students who had already started the old sequence could continue and finish that way, and our new students will come in and be enrolled in the appropriate DRE course. As far as scheduling our DRE classes, we're using a reduced seat time model, and that's how our English classes are currently set up. So we have some class hours, and then a portion is online. And that's usually about an 80-20% split. So our plan for the fall is to meet our students face-to-face 4 times per week. That will be Monday through Thursday for an hour and 20 minutes. And then the remaining time will be online work. We are planning to require the students to complete their online work in an on-campus lab, computer lab. We wanted to put something online to definitely have that technology component, but we also wanted to make sure that we were holding the students accountable for doing that time. And so we thought that by bringing them to campus and having them to do the work in a campus lab, we would be addressing both of those issues. And our labs have a tracking software that we can use to make sure that our students are completing their lab time. Also, we're going to try to do a reading-writing lab, and I'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Our planned course structure is that we want to do approximately 3 so-called units per course. In those units, we'll have, of course, low-stakes assignments such as reading and writing assignments and activities. There will also be some computer-based grammar instruction. Each unit will have a reading test or assessment and also a high-stakes sort of writing assignment. Now, after the 3 units, we plan to do a mastery final exam, which will have both a reading and a writing component. I'd love to show you a picture of the textbook that we're planning to use, but I really don't think that cover is even available yet. It's a brand new book by Kathleen McWhorter through Pearson, and it's called Reading and Writing About Contemporary Issues, the North Carolina edition. This textbook has been designed specifically for the DRE implementation. The readings are lexiled already, and this one textbook has material for all 3 courses. So we will be using this main text for 96, 97, and 98. And we're going to bundle that with the My Skills Lab from Pearson. Now, the one thing that this book did not have that we wanted was a grammar section, just to give students you know, something in writing that they could refer to when they did have grammar questions or issues, and a teacher or instructor was not around to try to help them with those. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull the grammar units from 2 other Pearson books, In Harmony and In Concert, and we're going to have those bound as a separate little grammar book for the students. And then in 098 for the grammar section and for the handbook, and since we're going to be doing a lot of work with MLA in 098, we're going to use the Little Brown Essential Handbook, and that happens to be the same handbook that we use for our English 111 classes. So we're trying to do the best that we can for students so that their expenses are limited, but that they definitely have the products and resources that they need to be successful. Pacing is something we haven't completely worked out yet, but we're seeking to cover approximately 1 unit every 2 weeks. We would like to build in a day or a couple days between units to remediate those students who have not made mastery on their unit and who need, you know, extra help with either their reading and writing, and to retest with hopefully some time at the end for those, of course, the final assessments. And if we need a day to get students re-registered and get them into the appropriate DRE for the next 8-week session. Our mastery model is that we plan to require the students to make 80% on every major assignment within each unit, and that they would have to meet 80% mastery, of course, on the final assessments. Students will be remediated if they have not met mastery, and we're going to give them an opportunity to retest if it's a reading assessment, or to rewrite if it's a writing assessment. On the remediation days, we're really hoping to allow our students who have met mastery to go to our reading and writing lab sort of as a reward. We want to give them an incentive to try their best the first time, and so on those sort of in-between days, we would like to send them to the reading and writing lab to just read something, for pleasure or for information, something they need to read, to do some more computer-based skills practice if they'd like to do that, or to sit down with an instructor and discuss, where they are and what they need to do to improve, or any other issues that they're having that they might need to bring up to an instructor. Potentially, they might be able to preview an upcoming unit or even to work ahead to some degree. We haven't exactly worked all that out, but that's just a plan at the moment. We don't currently have a reading and writing lab. We do have an academic skills lab that provides tutoring and support for any curriculum class, but we are planning to establish a reading and writing lab or center where we can do remediation with the students, where they can come to do their required lab hours for the class, but also we just want to make it an inviting place for them to come and be involved in reading and writing, not necessarily because they have to, but hopefully because they want to, and they want to improve as well. So we want to have a comfortable environment that it's aesthetically pleasing for students. We're hoping to have some just various books in there, looking at the possibility of purchasing some e-readers or tablets. We'd like to have some computer stations, obviously, for them to work on their computer-based assignments. Also, just some periodicals that they would enjoy reading. And we'll have it staffed by instructors who are teaching the DRE courses. The way that our current reduced seat time model works, right now we're teaching the students face-to-face 4 hours a week, and 1 hour is online. So the instructors staff a computer lab 1 hour a week, to make up for that time that we're not actually face-to-face with students in class. So we're thinking that our new model will be something like that, so that our DRE instructors will serve time in the new reading and writing lab. So that's something that we're working on and trying to get funding for, and we're really excited about trying to put that into, to bring that into reality. So right now we're excited. Of course, we're right where a lot of you are, a little nervous about the whole process, but generally feeling like we can move forward and get this done in an effective way. I would now like to turn the program over to Jocelyn.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Jocelyn Hirai. I'm a pre-curriculum faculty member at Davidson County Community College here in Thomasville, North Carolina. I wanted to speak with you a little bit today about some contextualization that we're integrating into our DRE classrooms. We piloted the DRE 097 and 098 courses this semester. And so this upcoming fall will be the first semester where we have complete integration into the DRE 096, 097, and 098. So I just wanted to give you a quick background information. This semester we're kind of tailing out of our integrated English 085 and 095 courses. And just to kind of show you how we're breaking down or placing students into these new DRE courses, we're considering the lower level English 085 students are DRE 096 students, while the higher level English 085 and lower 095 students will be placed into DRE 097. And then what we consider our higher level English 095 students kind of translates to the DRE 098. Now we're also offering one DRE 099 course, which is a 4-week co-requisite course with English 111 for students that would typically be in our English 091 4-week fast track course. We've been using Pearson products for the past 2 years in our integrated reading and writing courses. We've been using the Crossroads integrated reading and writing paired with the My Skills Lab course. For this coming fall, we're going to be moving to Cengage-based products. One of my colleagues, Dawn White, has been working with Cengage to create a custom-designed Fusion integrated reading and writing text. Now there are 2 books in that Fusion series. Part 1 we will use for the DRE 096 and 097 course. Sorry about that typo there on the slideshow. And the Part 2 will be with the DRE 098 course. We'll also be pairing those textbooks with the APLIA lab rather than My Skills Lab. The APLIA will count for most of our grammar-based activities. Each student will have diagnostic tests to complete similarly to My Skills Lab, and then it will create an individualized study plan for each student. Now that will count as 30% of each student's coursework, so it weighs quite heavily for each student, while the remaining 70% of coursework will come from textbook-based and Moodle-based activities. So just at a glance, a little bit more about our DRE courses. All sections will be held 5 times weekly for 70 minutes. Of the 5 class meetings, 2 or 3 will be lab-based. Unfortunately, we can't be in the lab every single day, but I think this will be a nice mix of being able to get that small group lecture and individualized work in the non-based lab, and then 2 to 3 days in the lab to work on their individualized study plans in APLIA. The courses will all be 8 weeks in duration, with the exception of DRE 099, which is 4 weeks in duration. We have some exit requirements to make it into English 111, and this is what we would expect from every DRE 098 student. A 12.0 GLE on the Nelson-Denny or a 1300 Lexile level. A combined score of 8, and that's from 2 readers on our exit exam, the highest being a 6. So they need to at least earn a combined score of 8. And then an 80% mastery in the course. Well, something that we've been considering is that while the Fusion text is excellent, and it does contain information about rhetorical modes, grammar-based activities, and writing instruction, something that myself and my 2 other pre-curriculum colleagues have been thinking about is that we really want to engage students at their skill level and what their interests are. And so to better engage our students, we'd like to contextualize our curriculum at the DRE 096, 097, and 098 level. So particularly, we have a lot of students that have been working in careers in advanced manufacturing, the healthcare field, and also information technology. So we believe that the students will benefit from a curriculum that takes their interests and the skills that they already have in their career path and apply it to reading and writing instruction. So what we're proposing is that we're adding contextualized lesson plans in the form of 6 modules per class as supplemental instruction. Now, this would not replace the textbook. This would just be something in addition to help them reach their academic goals for the DRE courses. Now, we previewed a number of readers, but in the end, we decided against using a traditional reader to pilot with this fall. Number one, because we couldn't really find a reader that contained the content areas in advanced manufacturing, healthcare, and information technology that kept that Lexile level in mind. Now, the Lexile level that we're kind of shooting for the DRE 096 students is a 960 to an 1115. So we couldn't really find a reader that had both that content and the Lexile levels that we were looking for. And number 2, as you all know, keeping the state budget cuts in mind, we know that the students that already have challenges covering textbook costs are going to have even more of a challenge this fall. So we wanted to find a very inexpensive or free option to not put an extra burden on our students. So if we've decided against a reader, you're probably wondering where our contextualization is going to be coming from. So what we're proposing is to use pre-existing materials created by the MCCWDTA, and that's the Massachusetts Community Colleges and Workforce Transformation Agenda. They were given a grant, quite a large grant, to create contextualized curriculum modules for developmental education and adult basic education classrooms. So they've created quite an extensive array of subject matter and correlating activities. So what I did, what I've been charged with for the remainder of this spring semester, I just came back from maternity leave in April. So rather than jump back into the classroom, my kind of charge was to select and identify a topic-based reading activity and a topic-based writing activity from the MCCWDTA pre-existing content, to create an assessment piece and to also develop and incorporate these reading and writing activities into the Moodle course for DRE 096. So what I'd like to do now is to just share a little bit of the content that I've been working on. Hopefully right now you all are seeing the Davidson County Community College DRE 096 template. Since we have not registered for our Moodle courses specifically for all instructors, what we've done is created just templates for DRE 096, 097, and 098 so that full-time instructors as well as adjuncts can access any of this information and import it into their own classrooms. So this is kind of the house for DRE 096, and you'll see as I'm scrolling down slowly here that I have kind of fleshed out 6 contextualized modules based on the pre-existing content from the NCCWDTA. Now the first item that all of the courses against all of the levels include is a booklet on kind of what contextualized learning is and how we're going to incorporate it into the DRE classroom. Now this should be just for the instructor resource and not something that the students should see. One of the main things I wanted to emphasize here is why would we bring this contextualized learning to the DRE classrooms? And it's really because all students learn differently. But because there are that concentrated large percentage of students in the healthcare, advanced manufacturing, and information technology career fields, we really want them to apply what they already know, what they're already interested in, what they already experience on an everyday basis in their career path, and apply it to become more successful in reading, writing, and critical thinking. Now, it seems that this is a relatively new thing that we're doing, but really it's already happening in our classrooms every day. We're always looking for ways to engage our students and help them translate what they already know into what we want them to learn. And so through various readings, writing prompts, and class assignments, these students are already making these meaningful connections. But to assist them better reach their academic goals in the DRE classrooms, what they're going to encounter is 6 specific contextual modules that have been selected through the 8-week course semester. This is just some question and answers about the contextualized curriculum modules for our instructors to use. Now, the one small setback, which isn't really a setback at all, but it's just an extra step that our instructors will need to take, is to create a free account with the NCCWDTA. So what you all are looking at here is just a link to create a free account. And the reason that you need to create an account is to ensure that only instructors are accessing this material and that students cannot. So you do have to identify yourself as an educator. The next page here is all of the pre-existing contextualized curriculum module content that has already been available. So you'll see here that there are 4 different modules in the 3 focus areas of healthcare, advanced manufacturing, and information technology. And the core topics focus on oral communication, integrating and presenting information from different formats and in different formats, writing communication, and reading and comprehending technical or informative text. Now for the DRE 096 courses, we're only going to present the modules in oral communication and integrating and presenting information. DRE 097 will focus on the modules in written communication and reading and comprehending technical or informative text. Also provided in the booklet here is just a short guide on how to access the information. Our student learning outcomes, which are available on all of our course syllabus. And then some industry-specific links in healthcare, advanced manufacturing, and information technology, just to kind of give the students some background on these industries and how they're thriving in North Carolina. this time I'm going to take you back to the template, and I know we have a limited time here, so really what I would like to do is to show you the pre-existing content and then also to show you just one module of the reading-based activity and writing-based activity I've been fleshing out. So this is a contextual learning curriculum module called Shift and Care. And so Shift and Care is one of the oral communication core topics in the healthcare field. And this particular lesson discusses the importance of clear and comprehensive oral communication in the nursing field. So you'll see here that there are many different components of the pre-existing content. But the first thing that we want our students to focus on is a reading-based activity that kind of integrates them into this contextual scenario. Okay, so the workplace scenario is available through the MCC WDTA website. It's also available as a PDF format, which is just for instructor ease to hand out to classes. And this would count as our reading-based activity. Now, these readings have not been lexiled by the MCC WDTA, so one of my tasks was to go through and to lexile all of the workplace scenarios that we're presenting to students. And they do all fall between the 960 to 1115 range. So our idea was that this would be presented in a guided group format. One of the great things about the content is that words that may be unfamiliar to DRE 096 students is that you can click on it and the links are still live so that it takes you to the MCC WDTA glossary or lexicon to give the students a better understanding of the words. After we would guide the students through the workplace scenario, they would be given objectives to complete the module, as well as assignments in each of the modules. So you'll see for Shift and Care, there are listening and speaking notes, which would be presented in a group format. The reading, which I just showed to you all, the workplace scenario, and then links to auditory and speech ability videos, self-assessments, and then the paragraph writings. And you'll see for the six lessons that the students will encounter, these first three are in oral communication. And they'll encounter 3 rhetorical modes of description, narration, and illustration. At the very end of the 3-lesson module, they would take a quiz on oral communication, and then another second quiz after the integrating and presenting information. Very quickly, they have a book that includes lecture notes on the paragraph level, since DRE 096 will only be focusing on paragraphs, writing paragraphs. And then they'll encounter the paragraph prompt, which they can write their paragraphs and upload them directly to the Moodle site. When they log into the paragraph assignment, they'll see a very quick review of some skills that they should have learned from that particular lesson and the workplace scenario. And then they'll be given a topic. All students should follow the 5-step writing process: pre-writing, drafting, revising, editing, and publishing before turning in their submission. Now, all students will be asked to complete each of the paragraph writings at an 80% accuracy level. So that's just a little bit about the contextualized curriculum for the DRE 096 classes. As a quick summary, I know I just went over a lot of information very briefly, but we're piloting this contextualized approach for the DRE 096 and 097 in fall 2013 by adding and replacing content accordingly in the spring, and that should be spring 14, based on student need. We're going to be focusing on the skills of oral communication and integrating and presenting information in 096. And in 097, the written communication and reading technical or informative text. Now, while I've fleshed out 6 of these contextualized modules, we're not requiring all instructors to use all 6 supplemental instruction modules. They may use discretion and incorporate as time permits. We've asked that all instructors, full-time and adjunct, try at least one supplemental instruction through the content that I've created, just to kind of see how students are actually engaging and whether it's contributing to their overall success in the course. And I think that's it for me, so I'm going to go ahead and pass you all back to Bill Joyner. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Jocelyn. Well done. And thanks to all of you presenters. Nice job. We're now going to address the questions that have been submitted during the program. I'm going to open the mics for all 3 of our presenters, Dell Enecks, Elizabeth High, and Jocelyn Hirai, and for Cynthia Liston.
Great. Thank you, Bill. While you're doing your magic to compile and show us the questions, I just want to add my thanks to our presenters. You know, it's very clear that each of them has spent a lot of time and dedicated a lot of good thinking to, along with their colleagues at their colleges, on how to implement effectively the new DRE curriculum. And I'm constantly amazed by the, again, the dedication and talent that we have among our faculty. And I also just wanted to mention that DRE 099 was not really addressed today. However, if you are thinking about using DRE 099 as an alternative to DRE 098, I encourage you, if you did not participate or in the first webinar, to listen, because Kelly Terzekin from Coastal Community College did share her college's approach to DRE 099, and she is a fount of resources or information and can point you towards other colleges, including, actually, I think Davidson is planning to use some DRE 099 for some students as well. So with that, we'll turn to the questions, and what I will do is just kind of moderate this and let the folks who are the experts on the phone respond as they see appropriate. So the first question, is it important to use mode-based instruction, or should we be focused more on critical thinking analysis? I will let the content experts respond to that.
This is Dell, and I'm not really sure that I totally understand the question. I guess we're doing both. I don't know that there's a focus on one or the other, that it's equally, you know, they are working on critical thinking and analysis, but also we are looking at the modes.
Okay. Well, if the person who asked that question, if there's something, if you can ask it a little bit more distinctly, maybe feel free to put it back in the chat box. Is there anyone else who wanted to respond? All right.
I mean, I think that I would just add that the curriculum does call for us to in some way address organizational patterns in writing. So, not that it needs to be the focus, but it definitely needs to be addressed in some way, I think.
This is Jocelyn. I would agree with that. I think on some level it's important for our students to experience different types of writing that they're going to encounter later on in their academic and also in their professional careers.
Great, thank you. Second question. Let's see, it's a question about mastery. What was your measure of mastery for your respective DRE courses? Asking, I guess, whether that applies to writing assignments, tests, combination. Who wants to go first?
This is Jocelyn. I'll go ahead and go first. if I'm understanding the question correctly, how we're going to reach that 80% accuracy level. It really, our courses are designed to be pass-fail based on that 80% accuracy. As I mentioned during my presentation, 30% of student grades are going to be coming from that APLIA lab, which is essentially their grammar instruction. The other 70% is going to come from reading-based activities, writing assignments, for 096 particularly at the paragraph level, and then just additional homework assignments as required. Does that answer the question on my part, at least?
I think so. Elizabeth or Dell, would you like to talk about how you guys are approaching this a little bit more?
This is Dell. I mean, basically, we're doing both. They're reading something. They do a reading test, you know, a comprehension test on their reading, and then that reading also prompts them to a writing assignment. So, yes, we're doing both.
We're also planning to assess both.
Okay. Let's see. So the third question was, what is plain text? If I recall, one of our colleagues from Beaufort talked about the fact that you could submit text into lexile.com to ascertain what the Lexile level was for that text. So I'll let the folks from Beaufort respond to that.
Hi, this is Pat Walker at Beaufort. Whenever we save a document within Word, Microsoft Word, we can choose what format. When you open to save, there's a drop-down box at the bottom of that screen that lets you pick how you'll save that document. For example, it might be a .doc or a .docx. Well, plain text is one of those. I frequently save in a rich text format that's a .rtf document, so that it can be opened in a variety of Microsoft Word versions.
I'm with you.
Versions. And plain text, what Lexile requires, and it takes out a lot of the formatting, like indentions and that sort of thing. It takes out quotation marks and ellipsis and those sorts of things that take up space. Also, when you submit through Lexile, there is a maximum length that's usually about a page that you can submit that document. If it goes over that, the system will spit back that the document's too long. It'll also tell you if there are problems with that plain text, if there are quotation marks left in there. And some of the documents, like when we look them up through NC Live, they're already Lexiled for us. It's just if we need to choose something else, then we'll just copy and paste and then save it in that plain text format. So the next time you need to save, just click that drop-down box down at the bottom when you save your document, and you'll see that pop up.
That's very helpful. Thank you. And I will add that the company that does the Lexile scaling is actually a Durham-based company, and I have met with them, and one of the things they have said is that if there are particular texts, because there is that limit with the online tool, if there are particular longer texts that you would like to know the Lexile level, there is a process on their website for submitting that to them, and some process for them to do that. So that's another option as well. Next question. This is back to Beaufort as well. Dell mentioned the mastery tests, and the question is whether that relates to textbooks.
And as I understand it, the question were these with the textbooks. No, these were mastery tests that we created here on, ourselves, that we went and found appropriate reading material at the appropriate Lexile level, and then based on what we had covered in class in terms of reading, we created our own assessments, our own reading tests to cover the material that we had covered in class.
Okay. And this one says, do you use any commercial lab program? I know that Elizabeth and Jocelyn both mentioned that they do, and so I think maybe this is asking again to you, Dell.
Not really. That's not a very good. Because English at Hand is a Townsend Press book, we do have access to some of those materials, and I'm not sure if the 097 or 098 instructors use those. I did at 096 a little bit. But again, we're trying to get away from that, just going in and drill and practice and handle it in a different way. So we do have a little bit of lab materials from Townsend Press, but that's all that we've used so far.
And my recollection, Elizabeth, you said you guys are using My Foundations Lab.
My Skills Lab?
Or My Skills Lab, sorry. And Jocelyn, you mentioned that you're using
Aplia.
What? How do you say
Aplia.
Aplia.
It's Aplia. That's correct.
Okay. All right. Beaufort Community College addresses grammar concerns per student. What are your class sizes?
Our class sizes are about 16. I think we might have had maybe just 14 or 15 because of the pilot, but we're going to limit it to 16 students per class.
Okay. And also to you, do students not revise drafts if they score an 80% on the first draft?
They do. Actually, that is part of their continuing practice. If they do not score an 80%, this is Dana, I'm sorry. If they do not score an 80%, of course, they are given the opportunity to revise. But even if they do score an 80 or above, they still have to go back and revise to make it as perfect as possible.
Okay. All right. All schools that have piloted, if you have this information, what was your pass rates from your pilot semester?
And this is Dell at Beaufort. I think we're the only ones that actually piloted this spring. So, in 096, it was about a 50% pass rate. Some of the students took off and some of the students struggled. So, we're working on that, but so it was about 50%. The success rates were better in 097 and 098.
Okay.
Dana and Pat are thinking quickly.
I'm sorry. In 097, I only had one student not pass.
And this is Pat. In 098, I had 12 students the first mini-mester. I had one who did not pass, 12 students again in the second mini-master, and one who did not pass. That's not anything fabulous. A lot of those people left without hair on their heads, but they are ready to go.
Okay, good. Let's see. Next question about the podcasts. Do students listen to those during class time, or are they part of homework?
This is Pat at Beaufort again. Yes, I used those during class time. The students had already read materials that both instructors would talk about, and when the podcasts themselves were prepared the first time, I had students in the classroom who could ask questions. So yes, they are presented during class time. However, we know that we can post those later on Blackboard when we move to hybrid, so if they want to view them again or we use those as assignments, they'll work that way as well.
Great. Another question here, are both the books in 096 and 097 going to be the same book? I'm not sure which college that was referring to.
That might be, this is Elizabeth, it might be to me.
Okay.
The main McWhorter text, the reading and writing about contemporary issues, is the same for all three. And then what we did for the little grammar handbook is for 096, we pulled the grammar section out of In Harmony, and for 097, we're going to pull the grammar section out of In Concert, and then for 098, they're going to use the Little Brown Essential Handbook. But all three levels will use the big main book, the McWhorter text.
Let's see, question 10, will attendance be taken for lab time in the reading writing lab, and will that satisfy the VA DevEd 100% face-to-face requirement?
Okay, this is Elizabeth again. I can partially answer that question. We will track their attendance and keep a record, yes. of whether or not they're doing their time as required. I don't know the answer about the VA requirement. We don't have a large VA population here at our college, typically. And so this is something that we obviously need to think about. But I can say that if a student is in a reading and writing lab with a reading writing instructor, that sounds like face-to-face to me. So obviously check with maybe your chief academic officer or whomever else on your campus could address that. But yes, we are going to take attendance and track them in those lab hours.
Right, and I'll just add to that from, there's been a lot of questions kind of more on the math side about some VA eligibility, and we certainly do know that for VA students for developmental ed, they will not allow any of the hours to be online or hybrid, and so that's something to bear in mind. That is the end of those questions. I'm looking over to the right on my WebEx screen, and I see a question asking how colleges handle grading, and if you throw out the initial grade, I guess that means kind of relates back to the mastery and the fact that students are allowed to revise their products. Does anyone want to talk about sort of how they then handle the grading? And I'm not sure if I got the question quite right, so if I didn't, then feel free to resubmit.
We're still planning, but this is my thought on that. You're looking for them to make 80% on each major assignment, or we are. So if they work with us and we intervene and we help, and they're able to take our our help and then create a product that now meets the 80% mastery requirement, then yes, they've mastered that, check that off, and they can, go on to the next unit or the next item. Dell?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think, it's about, it's not the technical part of the mastery, it's are they ready for the next level,
Yeah, this is Jocelyn, and I would agree with that. Something that we do, particularly with our paragraph and our essay assignments, is to use the same 6-point rubric that the English 111 courses use, just to keep some consistency across the board. So if we deem them, at a 4 out of 6, which is an 80% accuracy level, then that should translate across the board to the English 111 courses as well when they enter.
That appears to be the end of the questions, and so we will, for the first time, I think because this is the third of 3, there are probably fewer questions this time, which is good. That means that we've had a lot of participation across the board. So I just want to, before turning this back over to Bill, who will officially sign us off, offer my thanks to today's presenters for some great information, and again to remind folks that all of these webinars are available on successnc.org. And I know that one of the things I admire about our colleges across the state is the willingness to share information and resources. So I know that there's going to be a lot of conversations happening across our colleges and a lot of information sharing throughout this implementation phase. So again, thanks to everyone today for doing such a great job. And Bill, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, thank you, Cynthia. As we wrap up, I'd like to remind everyone, as Cynthia said, that today's presentation was recorded so that you can watch it again on demand at successnc.org. It should be edited and posted sometime next week. And I invite you to check out successnc.org for other helpful webinars and videos. Many thanks again to our presenters. Also, a big thank you to Jay Crutchfield of the Learning Solutions team for his work behind the scenes to keep everything flowing smoothly today. Now, on behalf of North Carolina Community Colleges and all of us on the Learning Solutions team, thank you for your participation. Have a great day and a great weekend. So long, everyone.